This Week in Trade. We are cutting through the noise to bring you the most significant international trade developments and, crucially, what they mean for you. This week, we're leading with new agreements from the G7 Trade Summit in Paris. Then we'll dive into US tariffs, US-EU trade tensions, updates in EU supply chain legislation, and several new trade agreements.
Welcome to This Week in Trade, bringing you a quick roundup of the latest international trade news and analysis from Goida Limited Director George Udell and the Geneva Trade Platform.
We start this week in Paris, where G7 trade ministers met on the 5th to 6th of May. They released a comprehensive communique that sets out a coordinated front across 4 major areas, directly targeting global market distortions. First, they took a hard line on non-market policies, specifically calling out industrial subsidies, state-owned enterprises, and forced technology transfers. The G7 committed to developing new, complementary tools to counter these distortions. Second, they laid out their most detailed position to date on critical minerals. Rather than just talking about supply chain resilience, they named a specific toolkit of interventions, floating ideas like price floors, quotas, price caps, subsidies, and joint procurement. Third, the group expressed deep disappointment over the lack of substantive outcomes from the recent 14th WTO Ministerial Conference in Yaoundé, pushing hard for meaningful institutional reform and a permanent moratorium on e-commerce customs duties. Finally, they took aim at the explosive growth of cross-border e-commerce in small parcels, announcing a dedicated G7 task force to tackle fair competition, customs compliance, and product safety. Moving to the United States, there has been a major legal development regarding President Trump's trade policies. On May 7th, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that the global 10% tariff imposed under Section 122 of the Trade Act is illegal. However, before you go adjusting your procurement budgets, the immediate business impact of this ruling is highly limited. The court's decision currently only applies to the small handful of companies that brought the case forward, and the White House has already filed an appeal. Furthermore, if you're dealing with Section 232 tariffs on steel, aluminium, autos, or other products, or Section 301 tariffs on Chinese goods, those remain completely unaffected by this ruling. But there is a crucial action item for business regarding China. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office has officially kicked off its statutory 4-year review of the Chinese Section 301 tariffs. If your supply chain heavily relies on Chinese products, this is your window. The USTR is actively seeking industry input on whether specific tariffs should be continued or terminated. Across the Atlantic, with trade relations between the EU and the US on thin ice, the European Commission, Council, and Parliament failed to reach an agreement to implement last summer's EU-US Turnberry trade deal. This had been complicated by President Trump's threat to hike tariffs on European automotive imports from 15% to 25%. The EU has been given some breathing room, saying that they have until the 4th of July to begin implementing the agreement. In more positive news, if your business has been struggling with the burden of the EU Deforestation Regulation, or EUDR, some relief is on the way. The EU's newly released April package introduces simplification measures that are expected to reduce corporate compliance costs. However, alongside these cost reductions, the EU is revising the actual scope of the EUDR. They are proposing to add downstream products like soluble coffee and certain palm oil derivatives, while explicitly excluding items like leather, retreaded tires, and certain second-hand goods. If you're trading those products into the EU, businesses should audit product portfolios against this draft delegated act. If your goods have been newly captured, like soluble coffee, instant coffee for the rest of us, you will have a new potential compliance hurdle to overcome. Alternatively, if you deal in leather, you might be off the hook. The proposal is open for public feedback until the 1st of June, so act quickly if these changes negatively impact your operations. Finally, while the G7 tackles supply chains on a macro level, we're also seeing innovative new bilateral moves. New Zealand and Singapore just established the world's first legally binding bilateral supply chain resilience agreement on the 4th of May. Both nations committed to impose unnecessary export restriction on essential supplies like food, fuel, and healthcare products during crises. Finally, it's been announced that Costa Rica has completed its negotiations to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP, only the second nation to join after the UK. Who'll be next? That's us for this week's Major Trade Shifts. Thanks for listening.
Those are the headlines from This Week in Trade. To go deeper, check out more comprehensive breakdown of these and other developments on Georgia's LinkedIn. This is a new series we'll be looking to evolve and expand based on your feedback, refining what we're presenting, and adding new voices. Let us know in the comments below and via the contact form on GTP's website how we can make this a more relevant and useful accompaniment to your coffee.